right, what's up, you beautiful shell heads? Welcome back to another video. Today, we are going to be ranking each one of the Turtles series from least favorite to most favorite. Couple of things that I want to get out of the way before we get started. This is just my opinion. So, what I want you to do is I want you to slide down in that comment section and let me know what you think. I want to know your opinion of your ranking from least favorite to most favorite. And remember, this is just an opinion. Everybody's got opinions. That's the beautiful thing about this community. We all love the Turtles. And this is an IP that spans generations. Guys, I was introduced to this by a generation that fell in love with this themselves. We need to understand that in order to keep getting Turtles content, we need to remember that some of these series, they're not for us. They're for a different generation. And that's okay. That's the beautiful thing about the Turtles. There's so many on-ramps for everybody to find something to absolutely fall in love with. I'm interested to see what somebody else would do with this particular list, especially as you get up to those top couple of slots. And remember, there's no such thing as a bad series. It might not be our cup of tea, it might not be our most favorite, but I want to get away from the language of saying from worst to best. I want to use that language of least favorite to most favorite. So I'm going to be ranking them, all five of them. Starting off, we've got Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I understand that there are different versions of the more lighthearted, family friendly turtles that can act as a gateway into some of the other versions of the turtles that have more of a substantive story to tell. And my biggest issue with this is that this didn't really have the time to fully flush out. And this was Nickelodeon's second attempt at the Turtles. And I think they did a better job the first time around, in my opinion. And so for me, that coupled with this being for a generation that I am not a part of, I'm going to have to put this one down at the bottom of the list. We've got the 2012 version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is Nickelodeon's first crack at making a TMNT series. And while I think the CGI has varying degrees of success, I like the more anime inspired iconography and the emphasis on the mutant aspect, the mutagen that is continuing to wreak havoc on the everyday lives of the turtles. For those of you maybe of an older vintage, then you will know that there are other times where they really teased making the mutagen a really substantial part of the story. And I feel like this has enough time to tell the story and allow for that to really get flushed out in a way that I would argue some of the other series just did not do. And so that couples with the fact that there is more of a serious tone to some of the episodes. And while this isn't a conversation about the comics, that's something that I particularly appreciate about the Turtles is when you can go to more of that serious place. Because the reality is, guys, that for those of you that don't know, the comics, that gets real quick in some spots. That does not pull punches. And so it's important to take into consideration that this is one that has those different tones, which some people might like more of the lighthearted fare. Lord knows I love the 80s and we're going to get there. The 80s version that has for as many of the serious episodes, they really do have a pretty light tone in the characterization of the turtles that for me, I like the mixing of the worlds in a pretty big way. So for me, this has to go above the rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even though I definitely think for me, as far as enjoyment factor, this is a story of the top three and then a jump down for the other two because Nickelodeon is more of a kid centric attempt at the series. Even though this has always been technically for kids, I really think you can see Nickelodeon's fingerprints on both of these series. And like I said, it's got varying degrees of quality for me. So, next, I'm going to have to go with the Japanese version of the Turtles. They made a Japanese exclusive series, Mutant Turtles Superman Legend, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Legend of the Super Mutants. And it was a mini series that came out that I thought was fun. I think at any of the at this point in the conversation, you have any of these series you could turn on and I would have a good time watching any of them. So I don't mean as a sign of disrespect that I put this below some of the other versions, and I know some of you guys are like, "Whoa, wait a minute. Why isn't we'll get to the rest of the list." But this came out in 96 and it's very anime heavy. It's referred to as an OVA, and so this is one of them that if you want something that is tonally and really in a lot of respects totally different than some of the other American versions of the Turtles, then this is just honestly a good time. You know, we have introductions of different versions of Shredder, Bebop, and Rocksteady, which gives it that familiarity with what we know from the Turtles, but presents everything in a different way. And not to mention, for me, having watched this after the fact, there are some aesthetic choices that I really, really dig here. There is, I jokingly say that this is a cross, that the aesthetic is a cross between Gundam and the cartoon version of Double Dragon. The face mask for the turtles is has that same pointy structure as the Double Dragon cartoon. And guys, that was my jam when I was a kid. And so when I saw this, I really enjoyed it. And I think the tone is pretty on point and the music. Oh man, guys, if you're into Japanese soundtracks, especially like OVA type soundtracks, then this is absolutely one to grab, take a look, and listen to, especially if you are a fan of what's referred to as tokusatsu. Tokusatsu, for those of you that don't know, is Japanese entertainment that has been taken and moved over to an American show, a la Super Sentai to Power Rangers, Kamen Rider to Masked Rider. There's Beetleborgs, there's VR Troopers, there's tons of them, and I'm sure Ultraman, um, Godzilla is even considered toku. So there's tons of versions of what I'm talking about. And so this I think really just allows for the same kind of spirit that even we can look to that made the crossover between the Power Rangers and the Turtles so awesome, and those designs so awesome, that this is something to absolutely or take a look at if you are a fan of different versions of the Turtles. Next up, I've got to go with the live action series. Now, some of you may be crying a foul that this is so high on my list. Uh, Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation, I think, catches a bad rap. I'm not going to pretend like it's the best series that exists or anything like that. But honestly, guys, I'm the kind of person that I can appreciate when a concept is taken and used in different instances. That instance might not necessarily resonate with me, a la Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I can appreciate an IP that I love dearly being used in a different context. Also, I grew up on the 90s movies. I have very distinct memories of watching the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with all of my older cousins and absolutely falling in love. Now, mind you, there I will be the first one to admit that the Jim Henson suits are head and shoulders prettier, better, more well done than the live action series. And a lot of people have um, varying degrees of opinions on Venus de Milo, the first female turtle. Look, I am all for let's explore. You gotta do different things. You gotta try different things in order to know what's gonna stick, in order to know what's gonna resonate with the audience. And so I personally don't mind, and maybe it's the Power Ranger fan in me with all of the different iterations of the Power Rangers over the years, but I am all for let's get wild. In the words of Batman, let's get nuts. I'm good with trying different things. And maybe it's a bit of nostalgia because I remember being a almost a teenager when this came out, and appreciating that being in a progressing adolescent perspective, that this felt like an attempt, I will say an attempt, to progress from the cartoon. So maybe it's nostalgia feels, maybe it's just member berries, I don't know. But look, guys, again, everybody's list is their own list, and this is at number 3 for me. Number 2, it's the 80s cartoon. I this is more of a 1A and 1B sort of situation for me. I really love this upper echelon of Turtles media. And so this is a series that was really big for me in my formative years. Growing up, there was almost this rivalry of sorts between Power Rangers fans and Turtles fans, because Power Rangers came out in 93, Turtles came out 6 years earlier in 87. At least the series did. The comics are older than that. And so this became a really big part of um childhood of Saturday morning cartoons. When it became syndicated in 88, everybody, it would Turtle Mania hit. And so for me, this was flashy and fun and cool in my first introduction to the Turtles. And then that is what would lead me into finding the movies and then finding the comics and then just a lifelong love affair of the Turtles. And for me, this has grown with the time, well, this has grown with my sensibilities and my preferences as a nerd over time, because this really takes a lot of influence from the comics. And like I said before, the comics, they're darker. And this property, while it's lighthearted and fun and campy and all of that kind of stuff, and shares some of those same roots as the later iterations, where it is for kids, it is fun, it's a big toy infomercial a lot of the time. It does a lot to build out the world. It does a lot to build out the the greater mythos of the turtles, and it's the first time outside of comic form that we saw Baxter Stockman, and we saw Krang, and we saw Shredder, and we saw all of these different characters that were brought to life in some of the best way that you can imagine. And the voice acting, chef's kiss. I think that this has maybe the best voice acting out of any of them. I still, even as I read things like The Last Ronin, right? I still read Mikey in that tone of voice, that surfer dude sort of thing. Maybe a little bit more grizzled and all of that. But man, I just, this is where my love affair began. This is where I can distinctly remember Saturday morning cartoons, watching this, and just absolutely falling in love. And this is the longest running series out of any of them. They told such a story along the way, over 10 seasons, that it just, this is where, for a lot of people, they became Turtles fans, myself included. And so this for me is number 2. That means number 1 has to be the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the second animated series in the history of the Turtles. This one was produced by 4Kids Entertainment and was a part of the Foxbox programming block in 2003 till 2009. And so I was, by this point, a teenager. I had grown out of the lighthearted, at least at the time, I thought I had grown out of it. You end up growing up a little bit, and especially at this point in time, it was not nearly as in vogue as it is now to be a nerd. And so you were kind of looked down upon for watching cartoons and stuff like that. And so this felt like it had a little bit more of an edge. This felt like this was a little bit closer to the roots, and namely because this series was co-produced by Mirage Studios, the original rights holders, the original creators, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, their created studio. And they had a pretty big creative influence on this cartoon, which means it very closely followed the tone of the original comics, and definitely took a pretty big step towards creating a darker and more mature tone than the 80s cartoon. There were stakes the further the 80s cartoon went, but guys, it was 80s Saturday morning cartoons. It was early 90s Saturday morning cartoons. It was more about selling toys than it was telling a story. This was the first major punch towards, let's tell an immersive story. And that's why this has to be my number 1. They were able to bring in so many themes and so many concepts and then build upon that, that for me, in outside of comic form, this is the single best and most fully formed experience of the TMNT mythos that exists. Not to mention, this is a huge step towards really emphasizing the science fiction aspects of this, because they do a lot with fantasy, space, time travel, all of those elements that are a part of the Turtles mythos. And you have everything from Shredder in the Foot Clan to Karai and taking over the Foot Clan as the first female Shredder. You have some of the iconic fights that we see in the comics between Shredder and the Turtles that again get dark, they get real. And you have the purple dragons, you've got Baxter Stockman, you've got Krang. Guys, there's so much there, especially when you get on into the series. Now, I know that a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of the later seasons, 6 and 7, the fast forward, but honestly, I think when you take the full and complete story, including the full length video of Turtles Forever, this is, for me, the single best collective story of the Turtles in animation that exists. So that's it. That's my ranking. Again, sound off down in the comments section. Let me know what you guys think. Share your lists. Let's talk about it. I'm going to be reading all of the comments. I look to engage with all of you guys because we're a community. We're all shellheads at the end of the day. And so I want you to do a couple of things for me. I want you to like the video. It does the thing for the algorithms. I want you to share this with more shellheads because we want to grow the community. And I need you to make sure that you not only subscribe, but you hit that bell icon to get all the notifications because YouTube tends to be on some nonsense. So with that, peace, shellheads.